1977, a cold, rainy year in London. Streetlights flickered over wet pavements, people hurried home, and among the rows of quiet houses stood one building that looked completely ordinary from outside, 284 Green Street. But beneath that silence, the house was breathing. There was a pressure in the air, something heavy and invisible drifting through the rooms, like a thought that refused to fade. Inside lived the Hodgson family, Mother Peggy and her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. Life was normal until the night everything changed. It was around 10 p.m. The children were asleep. Peggy had just switched off the hallway light when, bang! A sound as loud as a cupboard falling. She rushed into the girls' room, but everything was exactly where it should be. No furniture had moved, no cupboards fallen. Peggy frowned. "Did any of you hear that?" Janet, half asleep, whispered, "Mama!" The bed was shaking. Peggy brushed it off as a dream and left. But as she walked toward the stairs, this time the sound came directly from the wall behind the children's beds, as if someone was punching from the inside. Janet sat up, terrified. "Mama, it's happening again!" Peggy ran back, but the noise stopped the moment she stepped inside. Seconds passed, and then the drawer under the bed slid out on its own, slowly, then violently. Peggy tried pushing it back, but something with force, pushed it outward again. Suddenly, the entire drawer lifted off the ground and crashed into the opposite wall. Peggy froze, her face drained of color. Within minutes, she grabbed all 4 children and ran out of the house. The next morning she returned, shaken but hopeful. Maybe it was the wind, maybe plumbing noises, maybe a dream. But when night fell, the house awakened again. Scratches, taps, dragging sounds. Then Janet screamed. Peggy burst into the room, and what she saw made her heart stop. Janet was in midair, as though someone was holding her up by the hair, inches above the bed. Janet cried, "Mama, it's pulling me! Make it stop!" Peggy yanked her down, and the moment Janet fell, the bed violently slid across the room and slammed into the wall. The children were sobbing. Peggy finally understood. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't the wind. There was something in the house. Peggy called the police. When officers arrived, one stood frozen as a chair slid across the floor on its own, right in front of her. She wrote an official report. Unexplained movement witnessed. Soon, reporters, newspapers, and camera crews flooded the home. BBC filmed Janet alone in her room, and as the camera rolled, she was suddenly thrown forward, 2 feet across the floor, with no one touching her. No ropes, no shadows, nothing. Days passed. The activity grew worse. Janet began speaking in a voice so deep, so rough, so unnatural, that voice experts claimed a normal child cannot produce this frequency. In recordings, an 11-year-old girl said, "My name is Bill. I died in this house." The voice came from deep inside her chest, not from her throat. Reporters were horrified. Something was controlling her. Now the haunting changed shape. Toys were flung against walls. Bed sheets were ripped off sleeping kids. Lamps lifted, spun, and dropped. Sometimes Janet was found pinned against the wall. One night, while a journalist adjusted his camera, a loud thud echoed. He turned sharply and saw Janet thrown into the corner like a rag doll. Her eyes were open but empty, like she wasn't inside her own body. 2 paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the same couple portrayed in the Conjuring films, visited the home. Lorraine stepped inside and whispered, "There is something ancient in here, something angry, and it feeds on fear." They attempted a cleansing ritual, but each prayer only made the activity stronger. Janet's condition worsened. At times, she wouldn't blink for entire minutes. Sometimes she spoke in 2 voices at once. 4 months passed. The house became a battlefield. Lights flickered. Ice-cold patches appeared on walls. Children woke with scratches. Footsteps wandered the halls at night, and late in the dark hours, the dragging sound began, like someone's dead feet being pulled across the wooden floor. Everyone heard it. Everyone stayed frozen. Janet was eventually sent to a psychiatric ward for 2 weeks. The moment she left the house, the activity stopped. Completely. It was as if the entity needed her body, her energy, her fear. When she returned home, calmness lingered for a few days. Then, one night, she woke up screaming. "He's back!" Objects shook, walls creaked, a mirror cracked, and on the wall, written in what looked like charcoal, "I will stay." But oddly, after that night, the haunting began to fade, slowly, as though whatever lived there had finished its work. The house still exists. New tenants rarely stay long. Some report faint footsteps upstairs, doors shutting softly, children laughing in the night, cold breaths in empty rooms. And in the girl's old bedroom, in the same corner where Janet was once thrown, people say the air is colder, heavier, as if someone stands there, watching. It was a warm summer night in 1912. The small town of Villisca, Iowa lay unusually quiet, as if even the sky was yawning before sleep. A narrow neighborhood, a few wooden houses, and one home that would never be the same again, the Moore family house. That night the house was breathing for the last time. Inside slept Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 young guest girls who had come to spend the night. The day had passed with laughter. The evening felt ordinary, but history often hides its darkest moments inside the most normal nights. Close to midnight, a woman walking through the neighborhood noticed something strange. The light inside the Moore house suddenly went out. She thought nothing of it. They must have gone to sleep, she assumed, and walked on. But the truth was far darker. That light was not turned off by any family member. Moments later, inside the house, a faint but sharp sound echoed. Huff, huff. A slow, heavy breath. The house slept. Everyone inside slept. Everyone, except one person. Someone who did not belong there. The Moore family was deep in sleep, but one of the guest girls, Lena, stirred. A soft sound pulled her out of her dreams. The room was dark, lit only by pale moonlight slipping through the curtain. And in that dim light, she saw it. A tall black figure standing in the corner of the room. It did not move, it only watched. Lena's throat went dry. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow slowly stepped closer to the bed. In its hands was something heavy, something cold, something that would terrify America the next morning. An axe. People imagine murders as loud, screams, struggle, chaos. But inside the Villisca house, everything happened in silence. Josiah and Sarah Moore slept peacefully in their bedroom. The killer stood beside their bed. The first strike, silent. The second, silent. The third, and many more. Blood reached the ceiling, but the neighborhood slept on. No screams, no doors opening, nothing. When it was over, the killer gently pulled a bedsheet over their bodies, as if he could not bear to look at what he had done. Then he turned and walked toward the children's room. 4 children lay side by side, breathing softly. One by one, the killer stepped forward. One by one, the axe fell. One by one, the bodies were covered with sheets. The house remained so quiet that the distant ticking of the church clock could be heard. But even that sound felt weak against the silence of death. When it was done, the killer moved downstairs toward the guest girl's room. Lena's younger sister was already gone, but Lena was awake. Fear filled her eyes. Sweat ran down her face. She tried to run. There were signs of struggle. The bed shifted. A body fought back. She tried to scream, But either her voice never reached outside, or that night, even God remained silent. The killer struck again. Her injuries showed resistance, but resistance was not enough. Once more, the killer covered her face with a sheet. Then calmly, almost casually, he walked into the kitchen. He straightened objects, tried to eat, washed himself. And then, he stepped out into the darkness and disappeared forever. At 7 a.m., neighbor Mary Peckham grew worried. No one from the Moore house had come outside. The door was locked. Her hands trembled as she knocked. No answer. She peered inside, the smell of blood, heavy, suffocating air, and beneath white sheets, human shapes. She screamed. The entire neighborhood rushed over. Police entered the house and witnessed a scene that would haunt history. Every victim's head covered with a sheet. The axe left inside the dining room, soaked in blood. Windows covered from the inside with clothing. Mirrors and glass surfaces hidden. It was as if the killer didn't want to be seen and didn't want to see himself. More than 100 years later, the truth remains buried. No killer, no motive, no solid evidence. Dozens of suspects were questioned, none convicted. The killer came like a shadow and vanished the same way. That is why the story does not end with murder. It begins after death. The Moore house still stands, and it is never empty. By day, it looks ordinary, but by night, footsteps echo upstairs. Children's whispers drift through rooms. Doors close on their own. The sound of walking in the kitchen is reported. Soft sobbing is heard from the guest girl's room. Many paranormal investigators have spent nights there. Almost all say the same thing. Someone is still awake in this house. During one overnight investigation, a recorder captured a child's voice. "Don't let him back in." At that exact moment, the front door shook violently. They say some spirits cannot leave places of cruelty, but in the Villisca house, it feels different. It feels as if not only the victims returned, but the killer did too. At night, the wooden stairs creak as if someone is climbing slowly. Then the footsteps stop, right at the spot where the attacks began. Those who have slept inside the house report the same feeling. Someone watches us while we sleep. The house remains unchanged. The same rooms, the same beds, the same windows, the same sheets. Only one thing is different now. The people inside know this house no longer belongs to the living. The silence of the night was so deep that even the faint cracking of snow echoed like nails driven into the heart. And that night, the Ural Mountains were not hiding just their brutal cold. They were hiding something else. 9 experienced hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, were setting up their tent on a slope where the wind blew constantly. Yet strangely, at certain moments, the air felt frozen, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. The tent was secured. Everyone crawled inside, exhausted. They ate, they prepared to sleep. No one realized that this night would become the last night of their lives. It was past midnight when Ludmila suddenly opened her eyes. Something was moving outside the tent. Not loudly, not fast, a slow, dragging sound. "It feels like something is coming closer," she whispered. Yuri grabbed the flashlight, but Igor, half asleep, muttered, "It's just the wind. Go back to sleep." But those sounds, they weren't normal. Snow is soft. Footsteps crunch. This did not. This sounded heavy. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. Yet no one spoke another word. The next day was brutal. 12 hours of climbing in extreme cold drained every ounce of strength from the group. By sunset, fingers were numb, faces burned from frost. They pitched the tent again, lit a small fire, ate quietly. Then, as the night deepened, the wind suddenly stopped. A terrifying silence fell, so deep that only heartbeats could be heard. Then, a sound like icy breathing. Zena, her lips trembling, whispered, "That's not the wind." Something pressed gently against the tent fabric. Tap, tap. Yuri's hands shook. "Someone is outside." Igor reached for his knife. The sound stopped. Suddenly, a long, violent scratch ripped across the tent roof. Scritch! This time, fear crushed their chests. Near midnight, 12:33 a.m., the middle of the tent was pushed inward with force. Something was pressing from the outside. The entire tent shook. Everyone screamed. "What is that? Who's out there?" The zipper was frozen solid. It wouldn't open. Then, another massive impact. Fear shut down their minds. Breathing became impossible. Faces turned blue. Igor shouted, "Knife! Cut the tent from inside! Get out now!" One by one, they slashed the tent open. A storm of snow hit their faces. But staying inside felt worse than death. There was only one problem. They had no boots, no coats, bare feet on frozen ground. They weren't running from the cold. They were running from something else. About 500 meters away, a thin forest stood. They collapsed there, gasping. Nikolai, shaking uncontrollably, shouted, "Was something inside the tent? Why didn't anyone say anything?" Igor hesitated. "I didn't see anything, just pressure, like something extremely heavy was pressing down on us." Zena began to cry. "Then the footsteps, the scratching, that breathing sound?" No one answered. The mountain made a low, unnatural hum, a sound mountains should not make. Ha. This time, it came from inside the forest, only 20 to 30 meters away. Something was moving there. The cold turned savage. 2 hikers collapsed unconscious. Their hands stiffened like stone. 4 people tried to return to the tent to get help. They never made it back. Those who remained in the forest felt their heartbeats slow, second by second. Igor looked up at the sky. A strange realization froze in his eyes. He whispered, "We should never have come here." Those were the last words he ever spoke. A week later, rescue teams arrived. What they found still terrifies the world. The tent was torn from the inside. Barefoot footprints led away from it. Bodies scattered between forest and slope. Some buried deep under snow. Rib cages crushed from the inside. One woman's tongue missing. Clothing showed radiation traces. No animal tracks, no human tracks, no signs of a fight. Only snow, mountains, and that same icy, whispering sound in the wind. The world tried to explain it. An avalanche? But why cut the tent? A wild animal? But no tracks. A secret Soviet military test? Then why silence? Mass panic? Then how did bones shatter without external wounds? And most importantly, what caused that pressure on the tent? What made 9 trained hikers flee barefoot into death? What removed a tongue? Where did radiation come from? What was that breathing sound? And above all, what was out there that night? The Dyatlov Pass remains silent, cold, unforgiving. Those who visit report the same feeling, that the mountain is not empty. And some nights when the wind stops completely, people swear they hear it again. Breathing, waiting.